You know what they say about rock bottom? Well, they're wrong. There's always a basement level. And Jake Murphy had just found the sub-basement with a broken elevator and no exit signs. It started like any other Tuesday in the armpit of the galaxy. Jake was elbow deep in a Zephyrian toilet system on Space Station Omega-7, wondering how his life had led him to become intimately familiar with alien digestive processes. The Zephyrians, bless their 17 hearts, had digestive tracts that could charitably be described as catastrophic, and their bathroom facilities required a hazmat suit and a very strong stomach. Murphy, the voice of his supervisor, Cranks the Terrible, echoed through the maintenance tunnels. Cranks was a Blorvian, which meant he looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a filing cabinet and given it anger management issues. Yeah, boss? Jake called back, his voice muffled by the breathing apparatus that was the only thing standing between him and a very unpleasant death. You're fired. Jake paused, his wrench halfway through unclogging what he really hoped was just a hair clog. Come again? Fired. Terminated. Your services are no longer required. Cranks's voice carried that special joy that only comes from ruining someone's day. Apparently, the Galactic Health Inspector found your work substandard. Something about, quote, improper sanitation protocols and a disturbing lack of respect for basic hygiene standards, unquote. That's ridiculous. Jake protested, crawling out of the maintenance shaft. I follow all the protocols. I wear the suit. I use the disinfectant. I even say the little prayer to the sanitation gods like you taught me. Not enough, Murphy. Clean out your locker. Security will escort you to the docking bay. And just like that, Jake's illustrious career as a professional alien toilet cleaner came to an end. 23 years old, and he'd already peaked as a sanitation engineer. His mother would be so proud. The walk to his quarters was what they call a parade of shame. If parades were typically accompanied by 2 security guards and the lingering aroma of industrial-strength disinfectant. Jake packed his meager belongings into a duffel bag that had seen better decades and tried to maintain some dignity. That's when his personal communicator chimed with the cheerful melody that meant incoming message. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the face of Melissa Vorthen, his girlfriend of 6 months. Well, apparently ex-girlfriend, judging by the expression on her face. Jake, she began, her voice carrying all the warmth of a neutron star. We need to talk. Mel, if this is about me missing dinner last night, I can explain. There was this Krogian digestive emergency that I'm seeing someone else, she interrupted. His name is Zorthak Prime Minister Forlife the Magnificent, and he's the hereditary ruler of the Andorian Trade Federation. Also, he has his own planet, and a crown, and he doesn't smell like alien sewage. Jake stared at the hologram. Zorthak Prime Minister Forlife the Magnificent. Really, that's not a name, that's a resume. Don't be bitter, Jake, it's unattractive. We had some good times, but let's face it, you're a janitor who cleans alien toilets for a living, and I'm a sophisticated woman with needs. Sophisticated needs. What kind of sophisticated needs? The kind that involve not dating someone whose job description includes the phrase elbow deep in Zephyrian waste management systems. The hologram flickered off, leaving Jake alone with his dignity, which at this point could fit in a thimble with room left over for his life savings. But wait, there was more. The universe, apparently, had a sense of humor and a cruel streak a parsec wide. His door chimed again. This time it was his landlord, Grexnor the Persistent, a hut-like creature who collected rent with the enthusiasm of a black hole collecting matter. Murphy, rent's overdue. You've got 1 standard hour to pay up or get out. And since you just got fired, I'm guessing you won't be making that payment. How did you already know I got fired? News travels fast in the janitorial community, especially when it involves someone getting canned for creative interpretation of sanitation protocols. What did you do? Try to clean a toilet with a plasma torch. That was one time. And it worked. 1 hour, Murphy. Then your stuff goes in the recycler. As if the universe hadn't quite finished with its comedy routine, Jake's communicator chimed one final time. This message was from Repo-Matic Inc., the galaxy's most efficient repossession service. Greetings, Jake Murphy. The automated message began in a voice that sounded like it had been designed to deliver bad news. Due to non-payment on your Starship loan, we are hereby repossessing your vessel, the Flying Disaster. Please have all personal items removed within the next 30 minutes. Thank you for choosing Repo-Matic Inc., where we take back what's rightfully ours with a smile. Jake sat on his bed, which in 30 minutes would also not be his bed, and contemplated the spectacular completeness of his failure. Jobless, homeless, girlfriendless, and now shipless. He was achieving levels of loserhood that should come with their own scientific classification. That's when he remembered the Galactic Homestead Act. The GHA was one of those bureaucratic relics from the early days of galactic expansion, designed to encourage settlement of remote worlds by offering free land to anyone brave enough or stupid enough to claim it. Most of the good planets had been claimed centuries ago, but there were still a few options left for the truly desperate. Jake pulled up the galactic database on his personal tablet and scrolled through the available properties. Desert worlds with acid rain, ice planets where the atmosphere was mostly ammonia, gas giants where you'd need to live in a floating city surrounded by creatures that viewed humans as a delicacy. And then he saw it, Zorblax Prime. One previous owner, a fortress included, no current inhabitants. The listing was suspiciously vague about why the previous owner had left, but Jake was not in a position to be picky. He filed the claim right there on his soon-to-be former bed, using his soon-to-be former internet connection. 30 seconds later, he received confirmation. Congratulations, Jake Murphy. You are now the proud owner of 500 square kilometers of Zorblax Prime, including all structures and improvements thereon. Jake looked around his tiny quarters one last time. Rock bottom, meet basement level. He was about to find out what lay beneath that. 3 days later, Jake's borrowed shuttle touched down on Zorblax Prime with all the grace of a drunken rhinoceros attempting ballet. The planet's surface looked like someone had taken a perfectly decent world and then decided to redecorate it using explosives and bad taste. The fortress dominated the landscape like a metallic middle finger extended toward the heavens. It was the kind of architecture that screamed evil empire so loudly that it probably violated several noise ordinances. Twisted spires jutted out at impossible angles. The walls were covered in spikes that served no apparent purpose other than looking intimidating, and the entire structure was painted in a color that could charitably be described as aggressive black with hints of impending doom. Well, Jake muttered, shouldering his duffel bag, at least it's not a studio apartment. The front door was 30 feet tall and covered in symbols that probably meant something ominous in whatever language they represented. Jake knocked politely, because even when claiming ownership of an abandoned alien fortress, his mother had raised him to have manners. The door opened with a sound like grinding metal having a particularly bad day, revealing an entrance hall that stretched up into darkness. The interior decorating style could best be described as intimidating overlord meets furniture store clearance sale. Everything was either black, spiky, or unnecessarily large, often all three at once. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Anybody home? I'm the new owner, Jake Murphy. I come in peace and I brought snacks." A clanking sound echoed from somewhere deep in the fortress, followed by what sounded like someone having an argument with a piece of machinery. The argument was apparently being conducted in several different languages, none of them complimentary. "Oh no," came a voice from the shadows. "This is not good. This is very not good. This is the opposite of good, which is bad, which is what this is." A figure emerged from behind a pillar, and Jake got his first look at what would become his only companion in this architectural nightmare. The creature stood about 4 feet tall, had 6 arms, was covered in rust-colored scales, and wore what appeared to be a maintenance uniform that had seen better centuries. "Please don't hurt me," the creature said, holding up all 6 hands in surrender. "I'm just the maintenance bot." "Well, I say bot, but I'm actually a skitterling named Gleep. I've been maintaining this place for the last 47 years, which is a terrible job, by the way. The previous owners had no sense of practical design. Who needs a moat filled with acid inside their living room?" "There's an acid moat in the living room," Jake asked. "Was? I drained it after the 3rd time I fell in. Turns out skitterling scales don't mix well with concentrated sulfuric acid." "Who knew?" Jake looked around the entrance hall, noting the scorch marks on the walls, the suspicious stains on the floor, and what appeared to be claw marks gouged into the stone columns. "So, a Gleep, right? What happened to the previous owners?" Gleep's expression became even more nervous, which Jake hadn't thought was possible. "Well, you see, this used to be a Vorthan military outpost. The Vorthans were, how do I put this diplomatically, complete and utter psychopaths with delusions of galactic domination and a serious obsession with interior design that could charitably be described as aggressively hostile. What happened to them? They left about 50 years ago. Something about a strategic withdrawal after their homeworld got turned into a parking lot by the Galactic Alliance. They packed up most of their stuff, but they left behind some items that they said were too dangerous to transport." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the fortress's climate control system. "What kind of items?" "The kind that come with warning labels in 17 different languages and storage instructions that begin with 'in case of apocalypse, do not open.' The kind that make strange humming noises at night and occasionally glow for no apparent reason. And you've been living here alone for 50 years. 47 years, 3 months and 16 days, not that I'm counting. I've mostly been hiding in the maintenance tunnels and trying to keep the reactor from exploding. Did I mention the reactor is powered by what the Vorthans called contained stellar fury, because it is. And it's about as stable as you'd expect something with that name to be." Jake looked around the fortress with new eyes. The scorch marks weren't decorative. The suspicious stains probably weren't spilled alien coffee, and the claw marks definitely weren't from someone's pet. "So let me get this straight," Jake said. I've just claimed ownership of a fortress that used to belong to galactic psychopaths, contains potentially apocalyptic weapons, is maintained by a nervous skitterling who's been hiding in the walls for half a century, and is powered by something called contained stellar fury. That's a very accurate summary, yes. And you're telling me this why? Because you seem nice, and I haven't had anyone to talk to in decades except for the reactor core, and it's a terrible conversationalist. Also, because as the new owner, you should probably know that the Vorthons had a very loose definition of safety protocols. Jake dropped his duffel bag and sat down on what he hoped was a chair and not some kind of torture device. Gleep, on a scale of 1 to completely screwed, how screwed am I? Gleep thought about this for a moment, counting on his fingers. All 6 hands worth of fingers. Well, that depends. Are you planning to explore the fortress? I was thinking about it. Then you're probably somewhere around a 7 on the screwed scale, maybe an 8 if you touch anything that glows. What if I don't touch anything that glows? Then you'll probably only die from the regular hazards, like the automated defense systems, the unstable gravity fields, or the cafeteria food synthesizer that's been programmed with what the Vorthons considered edible. Jake looked around the entrance hall one more time. The 30-foot ceiling, the intimidating decor, the general atmosphere of barely contained menace. It was, without question, the worst place he'd ever lived. It was also the first place he'd ever owned. Well, Gleep, he said, standing up and brushing dust off his pants, looks like we're roommates. Got any suggestions for where I should set up my bedroom that won't result in immediate death? Gleep's face brightened considerably. Oh, I know just the place. There's a supply closet on the 3rd level that's only been exposed to mild radiation, and the automated turrets in that section haven't worked in years. Mild radiation, non-functional turrets. Sounds perfect. As they headed deeper into the fortress, Jake couldn't help but notice that his life had taken yet another turn for the weird. But for the first time in days he wasn't entirely miserable. Sure, he was probably going to die in some horrible alien-engineered accident, but at least he wouldn't die homeless. It was, he reflected, a very small step up from rock bottom, but it was still a step up. 2 weeks into his new life as the galaxy's least qualified fortress owner, Jake had settled into what could charitably be called a routine. Wake up in his mildly radioactive supply closet. Have breakfast courtesy of a food synthesizer that seemed to think everything should taste like chalk mixed with regret. And then spend the day trying to make his new home slightly less likely to kill him in his sleep. Today's project was the plumbing, because apparently the Vorthons had designed their water systems using the same philosophy they applied to everything else: maximum intimidation, minimum practicality. The pipes were laid out like a 3-dimensional maze designed by someone with a serious grudge against logic, and half of them leaked a substance that Gleep insisted was probably water but glowed faintly green. You know, Jake said, lying on his back under a sink that was roughly the size of a small swimming pool. For a species obsessed with galactic domination, the Vorthons really sucked at basic home maintenance. Oh, they didn't actually live here. Gleep called from across the room, where he was attempting to recalibrate a shower that shot water at approximately the speed of sound. This was a military outpost. The actual living quarters were built for intimidation, not comfort. Vorthon military doctrine stated that soldiers should be constantly reminded of the brutal realities of conquest, even while brushing their teeth. That explains why the bathroom mirror is covered in spikes. Jake adjusted his wrench and gave the main coupling a solid twist. There was a satisfying clunk, followed by the sound of water actually flowing through pipes like it was supposed to. He was just congratulating himself on a job well done when the wall exploded. Not exploded, exactly. More like crumbled. The ancient Vorthon construction materials, it turned out, had not been designed to withstand the kind of practical repairs that didn't involve threats of violence or ritualistic intimidation. A Gleep, Jake called, staring through the hole he'd just accidentally created. You might want to see this. Gleep scuttled over, took one look at the opening, and immediately turned a shade of green that Jake was pretty sure wasn't his natural color. Oh no, Gleep said. Oh no, oh no, oh no, that's not supposed to be there. What's not supposed to be there? The hidden chamber that I've been specifically avoiding for 47 years, 3 months, and 28 days. The one with all the warning signs that I can't read but that probably say things like "do not open" and "contents may cause spontaneous disintegration." Jake peered through the hole. The chamber beyond was roughly the size of a hangar bay, filled with what appeared to be storage containers, equipment racks, and machines that hummed ominously in the darkness. Emergency lighting strips glowed along the walls, casting everything in an eerie blue-white light that made the whole scene look like a sci-fi movie set designed by someone with a generous special effects budget and severe psychological issues. Well, Jake said, we can't just leave it alone now. That would be like finding a door marked secret and not opening it. That's exactly what we should do. Leave it alone. Pretend we never saw it. Maybe put up a "nothing to see here" sign and go back to fixing the plumbing. But Jake was already crawling through the hole, because if 47 years of living had taught him anything, it was that his curiosity was stronger than his sense of self-preservation. The chamber was even more impressive from the inside, filled with technology that was clearly several steps beyond anything he'd seen before. The storage containers were labeled in what he assumed was Vorthan script, but somebody had helpfully added translation labels in Galactic Standard. Jake read them with growing amazement: quantum disruptor array, molecular decomposition matrix, probability manipulation engine, galaxy-class reality distortion field generator. Gleep, he called back through the hole. I think the Vorthans left behind their entire weapons development program. That's what I was afraid of, came Gleep's muffled reply. Please tell me you're not touching anything. Jake was in fact already touching things. The central piece of equipment was a sleek black cylinder about the size of a refrigerator, covered in crystalline panels that pulsed with soft internal light. The label on this one was different. Omnipotence engine prototype. Warning: untested. Secondary warning: may cause user to become functionally invincible. Tertiary warning: side effects may include reality displacement, temporal paradoxes, and spontaneous ascension to godlike status. A Gleep, Jake called. What exactly does omnipotence mean in Vorthan? There was a long pause. Please tell me you're not looking at the omnipotence engine. Okay, I won't tell you that. Jake, listen to me very carefully. The omnipotence engine was the Vorthan's ultimate weapon project. It was designed to make a single user unbeatable in combat by granting them essentially unlimited power. They never tested it because their scientists calculated a 73% chance that it would either destroy the universe or make the user so powerful that they'd become bored and destroy the universe anyway. Jake examined the device more closely. It didn't look particularly dangerous. If anything, it looked like a really expensive piece of exercise equipment. There were what appeared to be hand grips, a place to stand, and a helmet-like apparatus that presumably went on the user's head. What happened to the other 27%? Jake asked. The other 27% was divided between nothing happens and user becomes invincible god emperor of everything. The Vorthan High Command decided those weren't good odds. Jake looked at the omnipotence engine, then back at the hole in the wall, then at his life in general. Unemployed, dumped, living in a radioactive supply closet in a fortress designed by psychopaths, with his only companion a nervous alien maintenance worker who spent most of his time predicting various forms of doom. You know what, Gleep? He said. I'm having a really hard time imagining how this could make my situation worse. Jake, please. Think about this rationally. You're talking about activating an untested alien weapon that could destroy the universe. Or make me invincible. Or destroy the universe. But possibly make me invincible. Jake stepped onto the platform. The device immediately came to life. Lights flashing in sequence. Panels extending to accommodate his human physiology. A gentle humming filled the air, and the helmet apparatus descended to hover just above his head. Jake, please, I'm begging you, don't activate the Doomsday device. It's not a Doomsday device, Jake said, reaching for the activation controls. It's an omnipotence device. Completely different thing. The difference is purely semantic. Jake paused, his hand hovering over what was clearly the big red button that would either make him a god or end all existence as they knew it. When he put it like that, it seemed like a perfectly reasonable gamble for someone in his position. Gleep, he said. In your professional opinion, what are the chances that my life gets better without some kind of massive universe-altering intervention? There was a long silence from the other room. Point taken, Gleep finally admitted. But if you destroy everything, I'm going to be very annoyed with you. Fair enough. Jake pressed the button. The universe exploded into light, sound and sensations that human language had no words for. Energy coursed through every cell in his body, rewriting his DNA, expanding his consciousness, and fundamentally altering his relationship with the basic laws of physics. When the light faded, Jake was still standing on the platform. He felt different, not dramatically different, but like someone had just upgraded all of his software to the premium version. Jake. Gleep's voice was very small. Are you still alive? I think so, Jake said, stepping down from the platform. Actually, I feel pretty good. Like I just had the best cup of coffee in the universe and a full night's sleep. Do you feel omnipotent? Jake considered this. He felt more alert, more aware, more capable. But omnipotent? Hard to say. Let me test something, he said, and gestured casually at the hole in the wall. The wall repaired itself instantly, stone and metal flowing like liquid to seal the opening as if it had never existed. Jake and Gleep stared at the perfectly restored wall. Well, Jake said after a moment, that's new. The first sign that Jake had perhaps bitten off more than he could chew came about an hour later, when he sneezed and accidentally vaporized the entire east wing of the fortress. One moment he was sitting in what used to be the kitchen, trying to figure out why the Vorthans had thought it necessary to include a built-in torture chamber next to the refrigerator, and the next moment he was sitting in a pile of rubble with a clear view of the horizon. "Bless you," Gleep said automatically, then looked around at the destruction. Oh dear, did I just— Jake gestured at the smoking crater where approximately 40 rooms used to be, sneeze a building into non-existence. Yes, you did. Jake stared at the devastation, then at his hands, then back at the devastation. I should probably learn to control this. That would be advisable. Yes. The learning process, as it turned out, was like trying to perform brain surgery while riding a roller coaster during an earthquake. Jake's new abilities responded to his thoughts, emotions, and apparently his bodily functions, but with all the precision of a drunk elephant trying to thread a needle. When he got frustrated with the fortress's climate control system, he accidentally turned the entire third floor into a tropical paradise complete with palm trees and a small beach. When he tried to fix that, he somehow created a miniature aurora borealis in the main hallway that played elevator music. The good news, Gleep said, watching Jake attempt to uncreate a flock of rainbow-colored birds that had spontaneously materialized in the armory, is that you seem to be able to fix your mistakes. What's the bad news? The bad news is that your mistakes are getting increasingly weird. Also, I think you just invented a new color. Jake looked at the birds, which were indeed a shade that his brain insisted couldn't exist, but his eyes insisted was right there. Is that bad? I don't know, I've never seen anyone invent a color before. It might be against some kind of universal law. Great. Add cosmic criminal to my resume. By the end of the first day, Jake had rebuilt the East Wing better than it was before, created a functional pizza oven that worked by manipulating matter at the molecular level, and accidentally turned the fortress's moat into chocolate milk. By the end of the second day, he'd figured out how to fly, could see through walls, and had somehow given himself the ability to understand any language in the galaxy. The concerning thing, Gleep observed, is that you're getting more powerful every day. At this rate, by next week, you'll be able to sneeze solar systems into existence. Is that concerning, because of the potential for universal destruction, or because I might accidentally create a solar system where I don't want one? Both actually. It was on the third day that Jake discovered the omnipotence engine hadn't just made him powerful, it had also made him detectable. The fortress's long-range sensors, which Jake had finally figured out how to operate without accidentally turning them into modern art installations, picked up the first ships entering the Zorblax system. Gleep, Jake called from the newly renovated command center, which now featured comfortable chairs, a wet bar, and what used to be a weapons targeting system but was now an espresso machine. We've got company. Gleep scuttled over to peer at the sensor readings. His already pale complexion went completely white. "Oh no," he said. "Oh no, oh no, oh no, that's a Celestial Republic battlecruiser, and that's a Krog Horde destroyer, and that," he paused, counting. "That's approximately 47 different species worth of warships, all heading directly for us. Any idea why? Well, it could be because you activated a piece of Vorthan super technology that hasn't been seen in 50 years. Or it could be because you've been unconsciously broadcasting psychic energy at levels that can be detected from 3-star systems away. Or it could be because word has gotten out that someone on Zorblax Prime has become functionally omnipotent, and every major power in the galaxy wants to either recruit you, control you, or eliminate you before you decide to conquer everything." Jake considered this while sipping coffee that had been created by rearranging the basic atomic structure of ordinary dirt. "So what you're saying is, my problems have escalated. Exponentially, yes. And probably everyone who's coming here wants to either use me or kill me. That would be a reasonable assumption." Jake stood up and walked to the command center's main viewport, which offered a panoramic view of the surrounding landscape. In the distance, he could see the first ships beginning their atmospheric entry, leaving glowing trails across the alien sky. "Well," he said, "I guess this is what they call the other shoe dropping. Actually, this is more like the entire shoe store collapsing. Gleep, I need you to be honest with me. How screwed am I?" Gleep was quiet for a long moment, running calculations on his fingers. "Jake, you're so far beyond screwed that screwed is a distant memory. You're in a completely new category of trouble that probably doesn't have a name yet. But I'm omnipotent now, right? Doesn't that count for something?" "Theoretically, yes. Practically, you've had these powers for 3 days, and your greatest achievement so far has been turning the moat into chocolate milk." Jake looked out at the approaching ships, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: excitement. Not the good kind of excitement, like finding money in an old jacket, but the kind of excitement that came from knowing you were about to find out whether you were capable of rising to an impossible challenge or dying spectacularly in the attempt. "You know what, Gleep," he said. "For the first time in my life, I'm not the underdog." "That's true, now you're the overpowered wildcard who might accidentally destroy everything while trying to help." "I'll take it." The first ship touched down about a mile from the fortress, followed quickly by several others. Jake could see figures disembarking, setting up what looked like military equipment, and generally preparing for either a siege or a very hostile job interview. "Any suggestions for how to handle this?" Jake asked. Gleep thought about it. "Well, you could try diplomacy. What if that doesn't work? Then you could try overwhelming force. And if that doesn't work, then we're probably all doomed, but at least it'll be interesting." Jake cracked his knuckles, and the sound somehow resonated through the fortress's quantum-enhanced structure, creating a low harmonic that could be felt rather than heard. "Interesting," he said. "I can work with." The first delegation to arrive was from the Celestial Republic, because apparently even in intergalactic politics, someone had to be fashionably early to the party. They came in a ship that looked like someone had crossed a luxury yacht with a cathedral and then covered the whole thing in gold leaf and pretension. The delegation consisted of Ambassador Quintilian Maximus XVII, who wore robes that probably cost more than Jake's entire previous net worth, and a retinue of advisors who looked like they'd been specifically selected for their ability to look down their noses at lesser beings. They set up an elaborate pavilion complete with silk banners, crystal chandeliers, and what appeared to be a small orchestra. "Greetings, mysterious wielder of ultimate power," Ambassador Quintilian announced through a voice amplifier that made him sound like he was speaking from inside a golden toilet. "I come bearing an offer of alliance from the glorious Celestial Republic. Join us, and you shall want for nothing. Refuse and face the consequences of opposing the most civilized force in the galaxy." Jake watched this display from the fortress's main balcony, which he'd recently renovated to include comfortable seating and a mini fridge. "Gleep," he said, "are they always this pompous? The Celestial Republic believes that if you're not being condescending, you're not trying hard enough." Gleep replied. "They once declared war on a planet because the inhabitants didn't use proper salad forks." The second delegation arrived while the first was still setting up their reception area. This one came in ships that looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought the concept of aerodynamics was for weaklings. The Krog Horde had never met a spaceship design they couldn't make more intimidating by adding spikes, skulls, or unnecessarily large weapons. General Scar the Bone Crusher emerged from the lead ship wearing armor that appeared to be made from the bones of his enemies and carrying a weapon that was probably illegal in 17 different star systems. He took one look at the Celestial Republic's fancy pavilion and immediately began setting up what could charitably be called a military camp and less charitably be called a monument to aggressive ugliness. "Puny human," Scar bellowed through his own voice amplifier, which made him sound like a particularly angry thunderstorm. "I am General Scar the Bone Crusher, terror of 1,000 worlds, conqueror of the weak, and crusher of bones. Surrender your power to the mighty Krog Horde, or we will take it from your cold dead corpse." "Well," Jake said, "at least he's direct about it." The third arrival was the most unexpected, a sleek civilian transport that landed with none of the pomp of the Republic, or the aggressive posturing of the Krog. The ship's ramp lowered to reveal Melissa, Jake's ex-girlfriend, accompanied by her new boyfriend, Zorthak Prime Minister for Life the Magnificent. Zorthak was exactly what Jake had expected, tall, handsome in that generic alien royalty way, covered in expensive clothing and jewelry, and carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having cleaned a toilet in his life. Melissa looked fantastic, which Jake found personally offensive given the circumstances. "Jake Murphy," Melissa called out, her voice carrying clearly across the increasingly crowded landing area. "We need to talk." "This keeps getting better," Jake muttered. "Should I prepare defensive systems?" Gleep asked. "What defensive systems? Last week our most advanced security measure was a door that locked from the inside." "Well, you're omnipotent now. Can't you just make some defensive systems?" Jake thought about this. "You know what? Good point." He gestured casually, and the fortress immediately sprouted an impressive array of energy cannons, force field generators, and what appeared to be a really large sign that read "Please keep off the grass" in 17 different languages. By noon, the area around the fortress looked like the galaxy's most hostile trade convention. The Celestial Republic had expanded their pavilion to include a diplomatic receiving area, complete with servants serving what appeared to be champagne and tiny sandwiches. The Krog horde had built what could only be described as a siege camp, complete with war banners, weapon emplacements, and a large catapult that seemed to exist purely for intimidation purposes. Various other species had arrived throughout the morning: the Zephyrian Trade Collective with their fleet of merchant vessels, the Crystalline Hegemony with ships that looked like flying jewels, and several dozen smaller factions that Jake couldn't identify but who all seemed very interested in either recruiting him or eliminating him as a threat. Jake, Gleep said, consulting a sensor readout, I count 47 different alien species, a combined fleet of over 200 ships, and approximately 15,000 individuals, all of whom want something from you. Any friendly faces in the crowd? Define friendly. Jake stood up and walked to the balcony's edge. Below, the various factions had arranged themselves in rough territorial boundaries, like the world's most dangerous tailgate party. Ambassador Quintilian was holding court in his pavilion, General Scar was sharpening what appeared to be a sword the size of a small tree, and Melissa was arguing with Zorthak about something that involved a lot of pointing in Jake's direction. Ladies, gentlemen and assorted alien life forms, Jake called out, his voice somehow carrying clearly to every corner of the assembled crowd. I appreciate you all coming to my little housewarming party, but I feel like there might be some misconceptions about what's happening here. The crowd fell silent, which Jake found encouraging until he realized they were all staring at him with expressions ranging from calculating interest to barely contained homicidal rage. First of all, Jake continued, I want to make it clear that I didn't ask for any of this. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning alien toilets for a living. Now apparently, I'm some kind of cosmic threat/valuable asset. It's been a very confusing month. Surrender your power. General Scar shouted. The Krog horde will put it to proper use. Join the Celestial Republic. Ambassador Quintilian countered. We offer the finest accommodations and the most sophisticated society in the galaxy. Jake, Melissa called out, you need to come down here and explain yourself. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? My boyfriend is the ruler of an entire trade federation. Jake looked down at the crowd, then at Gleep, then back at the crowd. You know what? I think it's time for a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Gleep asked nervously. My complete lack of qualifications for handling this situation. Jake raised his hand, and the air around the fortress shimmered. When the distortion cleared, every single person in the assembled crowd had been transformed into a garden gnome. 200 ships worth of diplomatic delegations, military forces, and assorted alien dignitaries stood frozen in their new ceramic forms, their expressions of shock and outrage permanently captured in glazed pottery. The silence was profound. Did you just? Gleep stared down at the field of garden gnomes. Turn everyone into lawn ornaments. Yeah, I think I did. Including your ex-girlfriend. Jake squinted down at the crowd, until he spotted a particularly well-dressed gnome standing next to a slightly larger gnome wearing a crown. Especially my ex-girlfriend. Jake, this might be considered an act of war by several galactic governments. Probably. But look at it this way, now I have the most intimidating garden in the galaxy. As if on cue, the remaining ships in orbit began powering up their weapons systems. Jake could see energy signatures building, targeting systems locking onto the fortress, and what appeared to be several dozen different species preparing to demonstrate their displeasure in the most violent way possible. Now what? Gleep asked. Jake cracked his knuckles again, and this time the sound created visible ripples in space-time. Now, he said, things get really interesting. The first wave of orbital bombardment lit up the sky like a very angry Christmas tree. Energy beams, plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, and several weapons that Jake was pretty sure violated the laws of physics all converged on the fortress at the same time. Jake caught them all in midair. Not blocked them, not deflected them, literally reached out with his consciousness and grabbed several dozen planet-killing weapons like they were soap bubbles. The collected firepower of multiple battle fleets hung motionless in the air above the fortress, creating a light show that was visible from orbit. That's new too, Jake said. With a casual gesture, he sent all the weapons back to their sources, but transformed them into something considerably less lethal. The Celestial Republic battle cruiser found itself being pelted with flowers. The Krog destroyer was suddenly under attack from what appeared to be a squadron of rubber ducks. The various smaller ships found themselves being bombarded with confetti, silly string, and in one memorable case, what appeared to be an entire mariachi band. I think, Jake said, watching the chaos unfold above them, I'm starting to get the hang of this omnipotence thing. Jake, Gleep said quietly. I think you just became the most powerful being in the galaxy. Yeah, probably. What are you going to do with all that power? Jake looked down at his field of garden gnomes, up at the fleet of ships that were currently being serenaded by a mariachi band that existed in defiance of several natural laws, and then at his fortress, which had somehow become the center of the greatest military standoff in galactic history. "You know what, Gleep," he said. "I think I'm going to start small." Starting small, as it turned out, meant completely revolutionizing interstellar politics, while trying to figure out how to turn 200 garden gnomes back into sentient beings, without accidentally creating a race of ceramic overlords. The process took about an hour, and resulted in what Jake would later describe as the galaxy's most awkward diplomatic reception. One moment there was a field full of lawn ornaments, and the next moment there were very confused aliens trying to figure out what had happened to the last several hours of their lives. "Did I just spend 3 hours as garden decker?" Ambassador Quintilian asked, examining his robes for ceramic residue. "Was I a gnome?" General Scar demanded, his voice carrying a note of existential crisis that Jake found oddly touching. "Jake Murphy." Melissa stormed toward the fortress, her perfect hair somehow still perfect despite her recent transformation. "You turned me into a garden gnome. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I'm dating royalty now. I have a reputation to maintain." Jake watched the chaos from his balcony, sipping coffee that tasted exactly like his childhood memories of Saturday mornings, because when you could manipulate reality at will, why settle for regular coffee? "So," Gleep said, "what's the plan for dealing with this?" "Well, they all came here wanting to either recruit me or kill me, and I've just demonstrated that I can turn entire battle fleets into mariachi bands. I'm thinking they might be more interested in negotiation now. And if they're not..." Jake gestured at the sky, where several dozen warships were still trying to extract mariachi musicians from their weapons systems. "Then I guess we'll find out just how creative I can get with cosmic powers." The negotiations, such as they were, took place in the fortress's main hall, which Jake had hastily renovated to accommodate representatives from 47 different species. The result looked like what would happen if the United Nations Assembly Hall had been designed by someone with unlimited power and a questionable sense of interior decorating. Ambassador Quintilian spoke first, because apparently being turned into a garden gnome hadn't diminished his sense of diplomatic precedence. "Jake Murphy of Earth, the Celestial Republic recognizes your considerable abilities. We propose a formal alliance. In exchange for your protection and occasional assistance with our enemies, we offer you citizenship, a palace on our capital world, and a substantial annual stipend." "How substantial?" Jake asked. Because even omnipotent beings had to think about retirement planning. "Enough to buy a small moon. I already have a fortress on an entire planet. What do I need with a small moon?" General Scar slammed his fist on the table, which Jake had thoughtfully made indestructible after the third time someone had broken the furniture during heated negotiations. "The Krog Horde offers better. Join us, and you will have command of 1,000 battle fleets. You will conquer worlds in your name. Your enemies will tremble at the mention of your name." "I don't really have any enemies," Jake pointed out. "Well, except for my ex-girlfriend. But that's more of a personal thing." "Hey," Melissa protested from across the room. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just disappointed in your life choices. You dumped me for a guy whose title is longer than most novels. Zorthak Prime Minister for Life the Magnificent has his own planet. So do I now. You're living in a fortress built by psychotic aliens. It's a very nice fortress." The negotiations continued in this fashion for several hours, with each faction trying to outbid the others for Jake's allegiance. The Zephyrian Trade Collective offered him a percentage of all galactic commerce. The Crystalline Hegemony promised to teach him the secrets of their advanced technology. Several smaller factions offered various combinations of money, power, territory, and what one particularly desperate ambassador described as really excellent health benefits. Jake listened to it all with growing amusement. 3 weeks ago, he'd been fired from a job cleaning alien toilets. Now he was being courted by every major power in the galaxy. "You know what?" he said finally, standing up from his chair, which was actually a throne now, because he'd gotten tired of uncomfortable seating. "I appreciate all the offers, I really do. But I think you're all missing the point." The room fell silent. "I didn't ask for these powers. I didn't set out to become some kind of cosmic game changer. I was just trying to fix my plumbing, and accidentally broke through a wall. But now that I have them, I think I should use them for something useful." "Such as?" Ambassador Quintilian asked. Jake gestured, and the air in the center of the room shimmered. When it cleared, there was a 3-dimensional holographic display showing the local sector of the galaxy. "Look at this," Jake said. "You've got the Celestial Republic over here, convinced that everyone else is a barbarian who needs to be educated in proper fork usage. You've got the Krog horde over there, convinced that the only way to solve problems is to hit them with bigger hammers. You've got dozens of smaller factions, all competing for resources, territory, and the right to tell everyone else how to live their lives. The display zoomed in on various conflict zones, trade disputes, and what appeared to be at least 3 different wars over mining rights. What if, Jake continued, instead of trying to recruit me to help you beat up your neighbors, we tried something different, such as? General Scar asked suspiciously. Well, for starters, universal healthcare. I mean, I can literally manipulate matter at the molecular level. Do you have any idea how easy it would be to cure diseases, fix injuries, maybe extend lifespans across the board? The room erupted in surprised murmurs. And then there's the food situation. Half the galaxy seems to be fighting over agricultural worlds and trade routes. What if I just made food, created sustainable ecosystems on barren worlds, turned asteroid belts into floating gardens? That's, Ambassador Quintillion paused, his diplomatic training apparently not having prepared him for this particular negotiating strategy. That's actually quite reasonable. And pizza delivery, Jake added. I don't care how advanced your civilization is, if you don't have reliable pizza delivery, you're missing out on one of life's great pleasures. What? General Scar asked slowly. Is pizza? Jake grinned. Oh buddy, do I have some things to show you. The next 6 months were, by any reasonable measure, completely insane. Jake set up what he generously called a government, which consisted mostly of him making decisions while Gleep handled the paperwork, and tried to prevent various alien dignitaries from accidentally triggering any of the fortress's remaining booby traps. The territory under Jake's protection grew rapidly, partly because of his demonstrated ability to turn hostile fleets into mariachi bands, and partly because word had gotten out about the universal healthcare and pizza delivery. It was remarkable how quickly interstellar conflicts could be resolved when both sides had access to quality medical care and really good food. The Celestial Republic became his first official ally after Jake cured a plague that had been affecting their outer colonies for decades. The process took him about 15 minutes, and involved rearranging some viruses at the genetic level, until they became helpful instead of harmful. The Krog horde took a bit more convincing, but it turned out that General Scar had a secret passion for gardening, and once Jake had created a few paradise worlds, where Krog warriors could retire to grow flowers, and practice sustainable agriculture, they became surprisingly peaceful neighbors. Even Melissa eventually came around, especially after Jake created a luxury resort planet, where she and Zorthak could honeymoon in style. It was a small gesture, but Jake figured that holding grudges was beneath someone with godlike powers. The fortress itself had been transformed from a monument to alien paranoia, into something resembling a combination government building, research facility, and really elaborate bachelor pad. Jake had kept some of the original intimidating architecture, because he had to admit it looked pretty cool, but he'd added amenities like a proper kitchen, a home theater that could display entertainment from 17 different star systems, and a garage for the small fleet of ships that various governments kept giving him as diplomatic gifts. Gleep said one evening as they sat on the main balcony, watching the sunset over what had once been a barren alien landscape, and was now a thriving ecosystem complete with forests, lakes, and what appeared to be a small herd of creatures that looked like purple deer. Any regrets about becoming the most powerful being in the galaxy? Jake considered this while sipping beer that he'd created by improving the molecular structure of ordinary water, until it became the perfect beverage. You know, I thought I'd miss the simplicity of my old life. Just me, a mop, and an endless series of alien toilets to clean. And turns out I don't miss it at all. Who knew that having unlimited cosmic power would be such an improvement over scrubbing Zephyrian waste disposal systems? It is a mystery, Gleep agreed solemnly. Although, Jake added, I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd just fixed the plumbing properly instead of breaking through that wall. You'd probably still be living in a supply closet, eating synthesized food that tastes like regret, and trying to figure out why the shower shoots water at the speed of sound. Yeah, probably. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien stars come out over Jake's corner of the galaxy. Somewhere in the distance, Jake could hear the sounds of construction as various species worked together to build what was shaping up to be the galaxy's first truly integrated interspecies city. It was chaotic, noisy, and probably violating several dozen different cultural norms, but it was also working. Hey Gleep, Jake said finally. Yeah. Thanks for not talking me out of pressing that button. Thanks for not destroying the universe when you pressed it. The night is young. And somewhere in the fortress below them, in a chamber that had once housed the galaxy's most dangerous weapons and now served as Jake's personal workshop, the Omnipotence engine hummed quietly to itself, content in the knowledge that it had finally found a user who was too stubborn to be corrupted by unlimited power, and too practical to let it go to his head. After all, someone had to keep the pizza delivery running on time.